in a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled within the rolling hills. A battle was brewing over a piece of land that had become the center of a bitter dispute. This is the story of how one individual turned the tables on a powerful homeowners association, HOA, that thought they could take what didn't belong to them. The background: John had inherited a sprawling piece of land from his grandfather, a lush area filled with trees and open space. For years it had been a sanctuary for wildlife and a playground for his children. However, the HOA, driven by greed and ambition, had plans to develop the land into a housing complex. Initially, John resisted their advances, firmly stating that the land was not for sale. But the HOA, believing they could outmaneuver him, began construction on the 96 homes they had planned without his consent. They claimed the land was part of their jurisdiction, using legal loopholes to push their agenda. The construction phase, as bulldozers and construction crews rolled onto the property, John felt a mix of anger and disbelief. He watched as his serene landscape transformed into a bustling construction site. Rather than confront them head-on, John decided to take a different approach. He bided his time, allowing the construction to finish, all while meticulously documenting every action the HOA took. He collected permits, took photographs, and gathered testimonies from neighbors who were equally outraged by the HOA's tactics. John had a plan, and he was determined to see it through. The legal battle begins once the homes were completed. John pulled the deed out of his safe. It was time to fight back. Armed with evidence and the will to reclaim his land, he filed a lawsuit against the HOA. He argued that they had no right to build on his property without his permission, and he was ready to take them to court. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. The HOA's attorneys were confident, believing they had the upper hand. But John, representing himself, presented his case with passion and precision. He laid out the timeline of events, showcased the documentation he had gathered, and highlighted the HOA's blatant disregard for the law. The court's decision: after hours of deliberation, the judge rendered a decision. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was announced. John was the rightful owner of the land, and the HOA had overstepped its authority. The judge ordered the HOA to cease any further actions on the property and to compensate John for damages. Aftermath: the victory was bittersweet. While John had reclaimed his land, the community was forever changed. The homes that had been built now stood empty, their residents hesitant to move in after the legal turmoil. John chose to turn the area into a community park, allowing families to enjoy the land as his grandfather once had. Conclusion: John's story became a local legend, a testament to standing up against powerful entities. He showed that with patience, determination, and the right knowledge, one person could reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The HOA learned a hard lesson that day. Greed and ambition could never overshadow the truth in a quaint town where everyone knew each other. A fierce battle brewed over a piece of land that had been in the Thompson family for generations. This is the story of how one man turned the tide against a powerful homeowners association, HOA, that thought they could take what was not theirs. The setup: Mark Thompson inherited a large parcel of land from his late grandfather. This land was more than just property. It was a sanctuary filled with trees, a small pond, and memories of his childhood. However, the local HOA had other plans. They envisioned a sprawling development of 96 homes, transforming the quiet landscape into a bustling neighborhood. Initially, Mark received notices about the proposed development. He attended HOA meetings expressing his strong opposition. But the HOA, confident in their authority, began construction without his consent, claiming the land was part of their jurisdiction due to a questionable legal interpretation. Watching and waiting as construction crews rolled in, tearing down trees and laying foundations, Mark felt a mix of anger and frustration. Instead of confronting them immediately, he adopted a strategic approach. He allowed the construction to finish, all the while documenting everything, taking photographs, collecting evidence, and gathering testimonies from neighbors who shared his concerns. He knew that patience was key. The HOA may have thought they could bulldoze their way through, but Mark had a plan. The legal showdown: once the homes were completed, Mark sprang into action. He had held on to the deed to his land, and now it was time to reveal it. With a determination fueled by years of family legacy, he filed a lawsuit against the HOA. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. The HOA's lawyers were arrogant, believing they could easily win. However, Mark, representing himself, presented a compelling case. He meticulously laid out the timeline of the HOA's actions, showcased his documentation, and emphasized the illegality of their construction on his property. The court's verdict after hours of deliberation. The judge delivered the verdict. The courtroom held its breath as the judge confirmed Mark's ownership of the land. The HOA had overstepped its boundaries, and they were ordered to cease all activities on the property and compensate Mark for damages. Aftermath of victory was sweet, but the battle had left its mark. The homes built on his land now stood vacant, and many prospective buyers hesitated to move in, wary of the ongoing legal disputes. Rather than harbor resentment, Mark decided to turn his land into a community park, a space where families could gather, children could play, and nature could thrive once more. Conclusion: Mark's story became a symbol of resilience and justice in the community. He proved that one person could stand up against a powerful organization, reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. The HOA learned a valuable lesson: that greed and ambition could never overshadow the truth and the rights of an individual. The first sign something was catastrophically wrong was the sound of heavy machinery, echoing through the quiet woods that bordered my property. My land, a sprawling 150 acres of untouched meadow and oak forest, was supposed to be my sanctuary, my legacy. My name is Elias Thorne, and I was too trusting. It started with a survey error, a tiny clerical slip-up back in the early 2010s. A new development called Whispering Pines Estates, managed by the notoriously aggressive Pinnacle Homeowners Association, HOA, had been expanding rapidly. They needed acreage. Through a tangled mess of old county records and what I can only describe as deliberate misrepresentation, the HOA convinced the local zoning board and, crucially, a junior clerk that a sliver of my eastern boundary was now part of their developable zone. I didn't notice until the bulldozers arrived, when I confronted the construction foreman. He showed me the permits, all stamped and sealed. "Sorry, Mr. Thorne," he'd shrugged. "It's official. You need to talk to the HOA." The HOA president, a woman named Brenda Vance, met me in her pristine, granite-clad sales office. She offered a paltry sum, less than a tenth of the land's true value, claiming eminent domain by proxy. I refused immediately. I lawyered up, but the legal battle was a slow, agonizing grind. The paperwork against me looked damning: decades of unprotested, ambiguous tax filings. Then I had an idea. A terrible, expensive, but utterly necessary idea. "Fine," I told my lawyer, Max. "Let them build." Max nearly had a stroke. "Elias, they're putting up 96 homes. We'll lose everything in the interim injunction." "We wait," I insisted. "Let them spend their capital. Let them paint the fences and install the sprinkler systems. Let them sell every single house on fraudulent title and let the new owners move in. Let them build their entire fraudulent little kingdom." For 3 years, I watched from my high veranda as 96 gleaming cookie-cutter houses rose on my soil. The HOA, believing the land issue was settled in their favor pending a final appeal, poured millions into infrastructure roads, a clubhouse, a massive community pool sitting squarely on my deeded property. Finally, the day came. The HOA, triumphant and over-leveraged, sent the final notice of settlement. A slightly better offer for the entire parcel. I walked into the county superior courtroom, not with an appeal, but with a declaration. Max presented the original untouched survey from 1978, cross-referenced with the single unbroken line of tax payments I had personally maintained for decades. We had proven that the zoning board's approval was based on a single, forged or erroneously stamped easement document from the clerk's office, a document that, crucially, was never legally recorded against my primary deed. The judge didn't even take a recess. The conclusion was immediate and stark. The Pinnacle HOA did not own the land. They had built 96 luxury homes on my private property. The moment the gavel fell, confirming my ownership of the acreage, I looked across the courtroom at Brenda Vance. Her face was a mask of pure horror. The Fockaday of the perfect HOA president finally cracking. "What happens now, Mr. Thorne?" the judge asked me, sensing the tension. I stood up, adjusting my tie. "Your Honor, I respect the law. I let them finish construction. I let them invest the money. I let the new families move in, believing they had a home." I paused, letting the weight settle. "I'm not interested in tearing down 96 houses. That would be cruel." The courtroom sighed in collective relief. However, I continued, meeting Brenda's gaze. "I am interested in the value of my land and the trespass committed upon it. My demand wasn't eviction. It was redistribution. It wasn't eviction. It was redistribution. I never thought I'd ever stand in a courtroom holding a piece of paper worth millions of dollars. But there I was, staring down a group of smug developers and HOA board members who thought they owned everything. They didn't realize. The land they built their 96 homes on was still legally mine, and I was about to prove it. Part 1. The land my father left Memmy names Daniel. And for as long as I can remember, my family owned 47 acres of open land just outside our small town. My father bought it decades ago, planning to build a small ranch and a few cabins when he retired. But when he passed away, the land became mine through a clear recorded deed. I didn't do much with it, just kept it clean, paid the taxes, and let the trees grow wild. Then, one summer, I noticed heavy machinery at the far end. Bulldozers, concrete trucks, and fences going up at first. Thought maybe it was city construction, but then I saw signs. Maple Ridge Estates, luxury living. Phase 1, I froze. That was my land. Part 2, the shocking discovery. I drove over and asked a foreman what was going on. He said, "Oh, this is HOA development property. We're building 96 homes here." "You must be mistaken, sir." "Mistaken?" I wasn't mistaken. I pulled out my deed right there on my phone. Lot numbers, coordinates, all matched. He shrugged and said, "Take it up with the city, buddy." So I did, at City Hall. They told me the land had been rezoned years ago under a different name, a shell company called Silver Point Holdings. Apparently they claimed they had bought the land for development. But the strange thing? That sale was never filed with the county clerk. No signatures, no notary. Just missing paperwork. Someone had faked the records. Part 3. Playing the long game, I could have stopped them right then. I could have brought the sheriff out and halted everything. But instead, I decided to wait. Let them pour every dollar they had into those homes. Let them finish the driveways, the manicured lawns, streetlights. Because once construction was done, I'd own every inch of it. For 2 years, I kept my mouth shut. I even joined a few community meetings under a fake name just to listen. They kept bragging about their smart development plan, never once checking who actually owned the foundation they were building on. Meanwhile, I hired a property attorney and a surveyor to quietly document everything. Every build, every permit, every encroachment, all of it on my deeded land. Part 4. The courtroom bombshell when the homes finally sold and the HOA was officially formed. They sent me a notice. Apparently, my backlot was causing drainage issues and they wanted to fine me for violating HOA landscaping rules. That's when I smiled. They had no idea who I was, so I filed a lawsuit, quiet title action, and walked into court with my original deed. Tax receipts. And GPS survey data proving the entire neighborhood sat on my property. Their attorney argued it was a clerical error, that they had good faith ownership. But when the judge looked at the official registry and saw my family's name dating, back 40 years, he stopped the hearing cold. He said, "Mr. Daniels, based on this evidence, the court recognizes your legal ownership of all property described here, including the developed lots of Maple Ridge Estates." The room went silent. HOA members looked pale. Developers looked sick. Part 5. The fallout within months. Chaos erupted. The developer filed bankruptcy. Homeowners panicked. Some tried to sue me. Others begged to negotiate. My lawyer and I offered a fair deal. They could buy back the land from me at a fraction of its current value, move their homes elsewhere. Most of them chose to buy. I made enough from those settlements to retire comfortably, and still kept 10 acres untouched for myself. As for the HOA president, the same guy who once tried to fine me, he had to sign the check himself. His signature undermined the sweetest irony I've ever seen. Part 6, Reflection. People ask why. I didn't stop construction early. Truth is, sometimes the best revenge isn't stopping someone. It's letting them dig their own hole. And watching them realize you owned the land the whole time. That day in court, holding my father's old deed, I felt proud. He always said, "Never sell your roots, son. Land doesn't move, but people's greed does." He was right. And thanks to that old paper, I turned their arrogance into my legacy. Ending line for YouTube outro. Sometimes silence is the best revenge. Let them build their empire.